Hey, Professor O here again. I just wanted to lay out in very clear terms the differences between the way we understand the truth in the creation stories in the Bible and the way we understand the truth in the scientific theories on the origins of life. Now, there are two creation stories in the Bible. The first one is called the first creation story. It runs through the first chapter of Genesis into the first few verses of the second chapter. It's known as the 7-day creation story. The second creation story in Genesis runs almost from the beginning of the second chapter all the way through the third chapter. And it's called Adam and Eve, or the Garden and the Fall, or the second creation story. Now, these stories, the literal sense, what the author intended us to understand, was symbolic. These stories are symbolic and they help us understand the meaning of life. So when it comes to understanding the meaning of life, and there's some very important things I hope you know that you'll notice about this story as we go through it, are true in this story. But they're not facts. They weren't intended to be understood as scientific or historical facts. Now, some people do read these stories as facts. That's called a literalist or a fundamentalist interpretation. And if they did that, and if people do that, it makes it look like what's in the Bible contradicts these sound scientific theories on the origin of life. For example, the Big Bang Theory says that the universe was created or started through the explosion of a single point of being something like 14.5 billion years ago. That's very different from 7 days. The theory of natural selection and evolution has good evidence showing that the Earth was formed about 4.5 billion years ago, and that life on Earth started to develop about 3 billion years ago. That's very different from the short amount of time that things were created in the Genesis creation stories. Also, the order and the way things are created are quite different. So, for someone with a literalist reading, there is a conflict here. And that's some of the things we'll look at in this class. Some people's solution is to try to use science to validate the Bible. Schools like the Intelligent Design School, and what they usually end up with is some messy and bad science. Some people will ignore what science says and says, well, I just believe the Bible. Their mistake, though, in both cases is thinking that the genre of the Genesis story is supposed to be historical fact or scientific fact. But that's not what the authors meant by it. They were using the symbols of their time to tell their audience about the meaning of life. So when it comes to that, what we might call the salvific truth or the intended meaning of the authors, this story is true. But we also believe that when it comes to explaining scientific facts, the scientific theories on the origin of life, like the Big Bang and the evolution of species, we are free to believe they are true because they're not trying to tell us about the meaning of life. They might be fun to reflect on to try to understand the meaning of life, but that's not the point of these scientific theories. Science doesn't try to tell us meaning. It just tries to tell us how things work on a very factual, physical, rudimentary level. So a fundamentalist, or someone who reads the Bible with a literalist interpretation, would see a conflict between the creation stories in the Bible and the legitimate scientific theories on the origin of life. However, we do not do that. We understand the creation stories of the Bible and other parts of the Bible are using symbols to convey a deeper truth about the meaning of life. And therefore, we don't take them as facts. And we understand that they were not intended to be taken as scientific facts. Therefore, for Catholics and other non-literalist Christians, there is no conflict between the scientific theories on the origin of life, like the Big Bang and evolution through natural selection, and the creation stories in the Bible. Okay, I hope this helps.